So, hello everybody. Welcome to the podcast, the AVID podcast, American Vets in Defense of Democracy. I'm really excited today to welcome Faisal Saeed Al Mutar. Faisal's a social entrepreneur and media executive with extensive experience in economic development, innovation, and nonprofit leadership. He's the founder and president of Ideas Beyond Borders, a leading platform for translating classical liberal thought, promoting innovation, and supporting policy reform across the Arab world, particularly in Iraq, where he's from. He's the recipient of several awards, including the President's Volunteer Service Award. He writes for the Middle East Uncovered on Substack and other publications as well. So, Faisal, thank you so much for coming on the Avid podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day and talking with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great. And like I was telling you earlier, before we got on the air, I was telling Faisal, I really, I saw his some of his discussions on Substack, and because of what's going on in the world, I really am trying to pull in more people from the region to get different perspectives. So it's really exciting to have Faisal here with us today. So we're just going to dig in. We're going to start a little bit with your background, Faisal, because it's really interesting. So you grew up in Iraq. And I think from what I researched, you had to flee the country because of your secular activism. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about living through the war, leaving Iraq, and then coming to the West, and how you dealt with all the change in your life. Because you must have been through some traumatic experiences and a lot of change. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. So I was born in Babylon in Iraq, in the city of Halla, which is the center of Babylon. But I grew up in West Baghdad, and my kind of the first phase of my life was under the regime of Saddam Hussein. So I was born after the first Gulf War. I was born 1991. So I lived through the sanctions, mostly through the first kind of 12 years. And then the second Gulf War happened in 2003. And the neighborhood that we were located in, called the Adil district, which is in West Baghdad and close to Mansour, is Mansour kind of the center, and we were very close to that, and on airport roads. And that's where many of the US tanks were actually entering Baghdad. And I remember my eldest brother, Samar, who went up, and we were watching the local news media. And the local news media were saying, oh, the Americans are being defeated in the south. They're stuck in Basra. They are being massacred by the Iraqi army, and they're leaving Iraq and all of that.
They were
And
saying they're stuck all the way back in Basra. They were
yeah,
okay,
so
far away.
this is what we're hearing. And then my brother, who went upstairs, and he was like, there are US tanks in front of our house. And then immediately, like within minutes after he said that, then the shooting starts, and then like then we start experiencing the war, because my elementary school, which was close to our house, was a Iraqi military base. And then they start like attacking each other. So I remember the war quite vividly. And the neighborhood that I grew up in, where a lot of Saddam Hussein's generals and used to live in. So that's what's called the district, the Justice District, because that's where a lot of like the generals and people of the Iraqi judiciary lived in. So when the war happened and then the regime was collapsed, then our neighborhood transferred from kind of a residential neighborhood of the judiciary to eventually became a hub for Al Qaeda and most of the terrorist groups in kind of West Iraq. Like that includes Anbar province. So we were like West Baghdad is on the border of Anbar province. So
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 I
that
like Abu
huh?
Ghraib. I know there just because I was deployed there. So Abu Ghraib area, kind
Yes,
of in
yeah.
that
So all
in
of these areas
between. Yeah.
are very close. So like
Hmm.
Airport Road takes you all the way to Abu Ghraib, and then after Abu Ghraib is Anbar, and
You're going into
then you get the
Anbar.
Syrian and the Jordanian border. So
Yeah.
pretty much most of that area, which some it used to be kind of the former regime's supporters were, it mainly became like terrorist groups, Al Qaeda, Katab, Omar, most of the known groups that eventually became ISIS. And so that was my teenage years. So
Mm.
how does that look like? Um, I mean, they start first blowing up like schools to. I mean, one of the most memorable days was like one of the first weeks of school. When schools returned, they blew up a police station close to our school. Then the teacher doesn't know what to do, ask us to go home, bullets being fired over us, constant kind of civil war. They ask people on the street whether they're Sunni or Shia. If they answer the wrong way, they get killed. There were times in which the paveways used to be filled up with dead bodies as we actually used to go to school.
Mm.
The bus or the school bus used to sometimes stop by dead bodies because they cannot pass through. So that was like kind of from 2000, yeah, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so then eventually, like at middle of 8, there was some like months of stability,
That's
and then
during
it
the
came
sur
back
that's during the surge, right? Things
during
got
the
a little
surge.
bit
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
So it got a little bit better, and that's when like my neighborhood was also active because we were part of also called the Awakening Forces, which were the Sunni tribes that helped, and there was the Sons of Iraq. So in the middle of kind of all of this situation, so my parents taught me English from a young age. So my dad studied in the West. Actually, he's an orthopedic surgeon, UK graduate,
Mm.
and so they taught us English from a young age. And when I was a teenager during this period, like whatever, there's sometimes like gigs for journalists, foreign journalists used to come to Iraq and looking for a translator, whether it's the Sons of Iraq who were fighting against Al Qaeda. And then there was kind of the piece where we're like, not just me, but a lot of families and their kids who were not raised in any sectarian manner. Like we were, I mean, most of us consider ourselves nominally Muslim or like from a Muslim background, but we really didn't like indulge in these kind of sectarian stuff where your name matters and your last name matters, etc. Like, so we were like speaking out, and eventually all of us ended up on list. Unfortunately, like these extremist groups have modeled some of Saddam's kind of authoritarianism in which they make you afraid of your own neighbors. So some of the people who eventually reported me into terrorist groups were
Mm.
actually colleagues of my high school. Yeah, eventually
Oh.
I get to know them that like, oh, someone's cousin is a member of Al Qaeda or someone's relative or someone's brother. So um so really like you're kind of constant fear. So that was kind of in the age where like internet was slowly getting into Iraq, and there was all of these anonymous groups, etc., where people kind of speak their mind because publicly they cannot. So in all of that, I ended up on a death list. In the middle of all of that, I lost a brother, and I lost a cousin who was also killed in sectarian warfare. And so all of me and my siblings were slowly started to get to leave. My siblings ended up in the United States, and then I was able kind of join in, and we were able to bring our parents. But yes, I in the middle of all of this, you probably remember this very well. The U.S. Withdrew from Iraq in the end of 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who has assisted in any shape or form, as I said, I was involved a bit in the Sons of Iraq, were put in as second or third lists of people that we should help, but the withdrawal was extremely chaotic. The files were moved between different embassies. From the U.S. embassy in Baghdad was very busy because there were so many rockets fired on them on the Green
Mm-hmm.
Zone. So they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, the file goes to the Doha office, and then it's good. Kind of the similar stuff that was some of the Afghans had to deal with.
It must have
So,
been it must have been nerve-wracking, right? To know that to just be waiting and hoping that your paperwork would get through, right?
so to say the least, I mean, I it's like I left so because of the security threat, because of like the constant death threats and targeting and like living in Iraq at the time is like, oh, every couple of weeks you hear somebody get killed and kidnapped, or like you're
Mm-hmm.
so when you're there, you are in constant like kind of like waiting on your on your fate when eventually they're gonna come and get you. And then
Mm-hmm.
I left to Lebanon, so I took a one-way ticket. I'm like, I'm out. I need to figure out a place. Uh, and then also Lebanon has its own issues, and that
Mm-hmm.
was also in a time in which many Iraqis were leaving the country. So there were even like neighboring countries when they see somebody's Iraqi passport, there was a lot of complications, and you can only stay a couple of days, and you can only stay a couple of weeks. Then I found I guess a loophole or is that Malaysia has international education and they are very kind of easy with visas and all of that.
Hmm.
And so and Lebanon was also on a peak of its own civil war and its own issues with Hezbollah rising in the south and kind of the same kind of similar sectarian issues that Iraq has.
Hmm.
And then I was like, hey, I didn't escape like cancer level 2 to go to cancer level 3. Like it seems like it, and in a place where I speak the language, but I don't have any relatives there. I don't know how to navigate different currency, different system. So I was like, at least like Malaysia seems like it's too far away land, and in the same, and does it not affected by all of these dynamics? And so I left there, and they have international education, so I got enrolled in a college there, and then 2 years after that, uh, I got a I went through the process again of like trying to get to the U.S. Then I got accepted in 2013,
Mm.
and so I was able to make it here, and then yeah, continue continue the fight. So that's really the short summary of how from Iraq to how I ended up landing in LAX airport
That's
in
it.
2013.
Incredible story. And I've talked to other many Iraqis, some not, I mean, your story's pretty harrowing and it sounds like you went through a lot. Um, but a lot of Iraqis I talked to, very similar stories, and they came here with very
Unfortunately, yeah.
little.
I mean, it's a story of a lot of people. And that's in a way like not to interrupt, but like in Iraq, it like my story is actually like by some comparison is considered a privileged one. Like it's
Mm,
because it's just I was like, oh, I was able to escape. Like or like there's always gonna be like because like the bar is so low to the way is like if you are able to have any sense of normalcy, that is itself is considered a privilege. So in a way, you talked about trauma in Iraq. It's like the trauma is so collective to the way that nobody feels it. Is that this is how big it is.
yeah, and I have to say, and we're going to talk about this maybe a little bit later about immigration today, but I just like the people that I have gotten to know here in the States, the Rockies, they bring so much. They appreciate when they come here and have the security and the chance to just live their lives. They bring so much energy and enthusiasm, and it's just amazing. They bring so much to the table. So, I don't know. I guess I'm contrasting to where we're at today. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I always really, I'm amazed by the stories I hear and the resilience and the strength of the people who get over here from Iraq and then build entirely new lives out of nothing. So, um,
Yeah, it's and I'm connected to many of the Iraqis in the diaspora. I mean, generally, it's been a very positive diaspora. I mean, many of the people are
that that's how
hardworking
it
and
works, right? You plug into the diaspora and people support people who are coming here and I don't know, there's just a network of people, Iraqis, who help the newly arrived who come here. Is that how it works?
yeah. I mean, generally speaking, I mean, thank goodness, like what I mean, the difficulty of the process is mostly the getting here part. everything,
Okay.
everything else is a piece of cake.
It's kind of okay. It's all
By
downhill from there.
yeah, it's mostly this kind of because it's so like ambiguous. I mean, the process is extremely is that you have a tracking number and the officer can tell you, well, it takes somewhere between 6 months to 6 years. And maybe 16 years.
Yeah.
so 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 you're like in this kind of phase in which you don't know what tomorrow is like. I mean, there's no way you can plan life. There's no way you can
Yeah.
um and so that I would say is like everything else is just peanuts. Like you land here and there's like a like having the language I was able to navigate easily and get
Oh
a
yeah,
job
you had the
quickly.
language already, so yeah, that makes it easier.
Definitely, yeah. I mean and it's been great. I mean, it's a little. I would say like by comparison, is like yeah, that period of wait is and being also away from family and also not knowing what tomorrow like. I think everything yeah looks like peanuts by comparison.
Okay, so you got over here. and you got settled in, and then how long? I mean, you started your organization, Ideas Beyond Borders. Was that much later, or when did you get the idea to start this organization?
So I started Ideas Beyond Borders in 2017. The
20.
first kind of so I have a kind of a cool American family, American family story. So before that, before Ideas Beyond Borders, I used to run a kind of a blog and social media stuff on like what's happening in the Middle East and in English, and it
Mm-hmm.
gathered a lot of following from all across the world. But I run that page mostly anonymously because of security reasons. Then I landed in the U.S. I made a post, and I had like 200,000 followers at the time on that
Oh,
page,
wow. That's a
and I
lot.
said, yeah, I said, hello, my name is Faisal. I'm actually the one running the page, and I now get moved to the United States, and I'm interested to like now my face is up, so like happy to talk to anyone. And then I get a message from a family in Virginia who said it's like, oh, we've been following you for years. We've always wanted to help like immigrants and like-minded people. So how about you come and celebrate the 4th of July with us in Northern Virginia, and then you get
Hmm.
to see the fireworks in the National Mall and everything. And I was like, hey, this is too good to be true. But like, somebody reaching out to you saying, yeah, I'm going to buy you a flight ticket to go celebrate the 4th of July. But then I was like, hey, I'm from Iraq. Like, what could go wrong? Like, if they end up being threatening, I'm able to. I've been in that before, so I could navigate. If they end up being that is so extremist. And then they landed in Reagan Airport, met them, wonderful people. And then they were like, hey, we have a two-bedroom house. Our daughter studies in New Mexico. How about you just stay with us? Like, it seems like your line of work and what you have been doing seems more aligned, like in living in the Northern Virginia area than being settled in Houston, Texas. Like,
Hmm.
because I was settled in Houston when I moved, and I was like, okay, like that sounds interesting. So then I packed up whatever bags I have and I moved to Northern Virginia to live with an American family
Wow.
for a year. And during that period, other than like doing, I was kind of invited to the media and doing speaking gigs. I met with a program person who received funding from Google on how to utilize technology for good. So they have this project of like how Google has invested a lot of money in things, and they want to know like how they can improve the livelihood or create social impact on technology. And they were like, okay, from your background, seem like you're very plugged into a lot of people. Maybe you can help us kind of understand how these things work in the Middle East. So that's why I get my first full-time job. So that's Private Ideas Beyond Borders. Get to know a lot about like kind of the nonprofit sector and how it functions and how to use technology, being plugged into a lot of people in tech and finance and other things. And then I started Ideas Beyond Borders in 2017. And the backstory really kind of behind it is back to where I grew up is Americans came into Iraq with a lot of assumptions.
Hmm.
Um, some of them are the most common, which is they thought Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and it didn't, or it had, but it didn't during 2003. Oh, we're gonna be welcomed by flowers, and people in Fallujah have all read Thomas Jefferson, and they all want to be
Yeah, right.
they cannot wait for Rousseau to be the new author of the new Iraqi constitution, and I mean now it's like sounds like a Saturday Night live skit, right? Like when
Hmm.
you read some of like the architects of the Iraq War and you hear some
Sounds
of the
crazy. Sounds crazy.
yeah, like when you read it, like when I read it now, like looking in hindsight, it's like
Mm.
you ask questions like, did people really believe that? Like, did they really think that Iraq would and so for a lot of reasons, which we can talk into, but one of the main kind of issues is, and there's a lot of issues in Iraq, but also in the larger Middle East, is information and how
Hmm.
to get. I know this is a global problem, but it's also kind of the regional problem is that most of the information ecosystem is owned by states around the Middle East. So really,
Hmm.
pretty much, I mean, to give you a context of my childhood, and you probably would laugh at this because you think it's a joke. I actually, most Iraqis, including myself, especially people in Baghdad, didn't know that Iraq invaded Kuwait.
Because that information was controlled, right?
We were told that Israel and the US launched a war against Iraq, and that's why it's called the mother of all battles.
Hmm.
And Saddam Hussein kicked Israel and the US out of Iraq, and
Mm.
we won the war.
Oh.
And he built a mosque, which was in my neighborhood, in which the menorah of a mosque is an AK-47 and a ballistic missile.
Oh.
And it's called the al-Ma'arik Mosque, which is the mother of all battles mosque, which is that was
Mm.
really like walking distance from my house. So that gives you and the information ecosystem. So you hear that on the TV made by the government. The school is controlled by the government. They give you also their own version of the story. All
Hmm.
matches up. And what happens is that like the information ecosphere is extremely insane. Like it's all government propaganda, militia propaganda, etc. And even when we had free speech, quote unquote, after the Iraq War, so we moved from what I call 1948 to Brave New World, in
Mm.
which we moved from the Ministry of Truth to 1,000 media channels supported by 1,000 militias, and each of them telling you their version of the truth. So we reached like a post-truth level, in which we also reached a level in which nobody knows what the truth is, because now we went from like controlled truth to fragmented truth, and then most people cannot even connect the dots of
Just
like
too
what's
confusing. Too much information.
too much information. So we moved
Yeah.
from like all the three sources of information to too much information. And this is just one example. I mean, if you look at Syria, kind of similar thing. Some countries like Lebanon has more freedom. United Arab Emirates in Dubai, they have media cities, so they also have a lot more perspective being exposed to. So of course the region is not monolithic in that shit. But that's I was like, hey, if there's one thing like if there is something to be changed, and I'm not a governmental actor, I'm not Marco Rubio or the head of the Department of War, in which I can do things militarily. Like if there's something that we should do, and especially something that the government shouldn't do, because it's going to be easily viewed as a U.S. propaganda or Israeli propaganda, is actually to have independent organization that helps change the ecosystem of formation. That is not government funded, that is not associated with any foreign intelligence or anything of that sort, and not viewed through that lens. Like, for
Mm.
example, the U.S. Agency for Global Media, like it's immediately people think of it like, oh, this is a USA CIA propaganda that's trying to push,
Propaganda, right.
yeah, or the Voice of America, etc. So we're like,
Hmm.
I wanted to establish something that is like in a way clean enough, or not clean enough, but like non-governmental on. So that way it's not viewed through the lens of like this is a government initiative from any government trying to change us. And so that's really kind of the how it started is like, and then the organization grew significantly. Many people thought that was a good idea. And now we have offices in Iraq. So we have office in Arbil in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, and we also have a
Hmm.
Baghdad country director, and we have an office in Dubai. So we grew a lot, and now we have, I think, about 8 million subscribers all across from
Wow.
Iraq all the way to Morocco,
Yeah.
and really became like kind of a go-to source for a lot of people who are interested in like understanding the nuances.
Now, this is online content, electronic,
Yes.
or is it hard? Yeah, of course. I was thinking hard copy books, and but that's yeah, that's kind of in the past, I guess.
Yeah, so we do we have translated books, so that's also part of our work. And we submit to book festivals across the Middle East, and
Hmm.
sometimes they require physical copies. But now the consumption, like information consumption, not just the region, but the entire world, has been really mostly digital. Like people are more
Yeah.
learning from podcasts and videos and all of that that they're learning from books.
Yeah.
So in terms of like downloads in our content, like some of our videos get watched like 5 million times, but a book on the same subject get like 10,000 downloads. So like
Wow.
the gap is pretty huge as like more people are just and the Middle East unfortunately doesn't have a much of a book reading culture for a lot of reasons. But it's so that's I would say digital. Yeah, digital first is our kind
Okay.
of focus.
So if someone was curious here in the States, can you access this material
Of course.
States? Okay. Maybe I'll have to look at it. I've been trying working on my Arabic for several years now, so maybe I'll go to your site and maybe study a little bit, get some content to read up on, help my Arabic a little bit.
Awesome. So the website is Bayt al Hikmah, BAYTALHIKMA2.org. And there,
Okay.
there we can see like the books we do, etc. And the naming of that, someone who, because you have visited Baghdad, so you probably know what I'm talking about.
House of Wisdom. I know about the
Yeah,
House of
exactly.
Wisdom. I know the
Exactly.
history.
So the
Yeah.
program is House of Wisdom 2.0. That is the name of the program. So
Oh, that's
it's a
great.
reincarnation of the physical House of Wisdom that used to translate books from the Roman Empire and Greece and others into Arabic. So
Yeah.
we are the new version of Beit al-Hikmah
Dur-
of Beit
During
al-Hikmah.
the Abbasids, right? The Abbasid
Exactly.
Renaissance. That's great. Okay, I didn't know. I knew a little bit about it, but that's really fascinating, and that's what a great cause. I'm surprised to hear you say. I always thought that the Arabic culture was very, very like, I don't know, because I know that Iraq had its what was the literary street? Was it
Mutanabbi
Al?
Street.
Sorry?
Mutanabbi Street. That's where all the
Watanabe
books
Street.
is.
Yeah, that was a.
Yeah.
But Al Qaeda bombed. I remember it was bombed several times. And but whenever I've visited the Middle East, maybe it's just a misperception on my part. But in Cairo also, they have book fairs, and it seems like literacy is very important to them. But maybe that's just a slice of the population. I don't know.
So the answer is yes, and I'm going to give you another kind of additional. Arabic has this challenge of standardization
Hmm.
that makes it quite difficult in knowledge distribution.
Mm,
Over so everyone knows MSA, which is the Modern Standard Arabic, that is kind of
yeah.
the one taught in academia, etc. But almost nobody speaks MSA.
Yeah,
So
that's what I study. That's the problem. Yeah, students study it, but when you go and travel into the region and try and speak in the streets, no one speaks MSA.
yeah, you probably
Yeah,
have heard like shakumaku in Iraq, like what's up?
of course.
Shakumaku does not exist in MSA. It's
No,
a, it's
no,
a,
no,
it's a
no.
purely
Well,
an
then there's
Iraqi.
also the dialect that's a regional dialect as well. There's the regional dialects, so there's all kinds of layers to Arabic. That's what part of what makes it such a difficult language, I guess.
Exactly. So what happens like even now with even our content is what we do is like some of our content, the largest Arab country is Egypt. Many people are familiar with Egyptian dialects because of art and music, etc. So we actually have
Hmm.
produced some content in Egyptian, some that are targeted toward Iraqi audiences in Iraqi dialect, some are targeted towards Gulf audiences in the Gulf, because there's like multiple kind of regional dialects and as a result of that, like unless you are an academic or have pursued some like have high level of education,
Hmm.
um, you most people don't read MSA. Like
Yeah.
they consume it probably on the news and poetry
Hmm.
and so that's I think one aspect is that it's yeah the other aspect which is a bit logistical is that the Arabic publishing industry is extremely fragmented because
Mm.
we don't have a union of that is successful. I mean, there's been some attempts that says like, oh, if a book is in Egypt, it's available also in Iraq, but it's also available in Saudi, because each country has its own regulations on information and publishing and all of that stuff. So just because a book is published in the UAE doesn't mean it's published in Morocco. There is no,
Mm.
so it's not like there is kind of like Simon Schuster that exists in 50 states. It's
Yeah.
more like separate publishing houses. And that what makes the appeal of online a bit more is because there is no borders, right? So if you
Hmm.
publish a book as a PDF, then anyone from anywhere can download it. You don't have to go through the regulations of different countries on what's allowed and what's not allowed. And so that creates like a created and kind of a more socioeconomic side is that if you're constantly bombed and worried for your life, you probably have less less time to read.
Yeah.
than
Of
average people. I mean, even when one of our major interventions we did in the ecosystem of information is Wikipedia. So lots of Arabic Wikipedia is built by Ideas Beyond Borders, especially on the fields of sciences to human rights to humanities, etc.
That's wonderful.
And the way we were able to do it is actually pay contributors, even though Wikipedia is a volunteer-based system. And
Yeah.
uh, but I met with Wikimedia Foundation, which was Wikipedia, and I was like, hey, if you are a Syrian living paycheck to paycheck under authoritarianism or under or possibly on the verge of starving, the last thing you want to do is to be able to spend time on Wikipedia to so I was like, we have to create an incentive structure that is kind of separate than the usual kind of a person that mindset that created Wikipedia as a person in San Francisco who has probably a lot of his time, a lot of his plate, and he wants to add nerdy things into into the world of knowledge. But I was like, hey, but they're the system, and that's why Wikipedia Arabic was extremely undeveloped by most accounts, even though it's available and existed for almost 2 decades, but not many contributions. And I was like, hey, like this is something that we have to intervene in. And I was able to kind of get a grant to be able to pay some of those translators. We did work in universities in Mosul and all across Iraq and get a lot of the students involved, but with some incentive structure. So that's I think is like our contribution to the ecosystem formation is because I know how the region works. I've lived in many of these places. I still go to the region quite a lot. Like I know what
Mhm.
incentivizes people, and eventually, like we were able to do a lot in that space.
And that's wonderful. And then you can track, you can see that people are actually using and looking at these sites and reading them and um, you
In
know,
millions.
yeah, that's amazing.
And especially with Wikipedia, like it's one of those things that people search information, they see Wikipedia on the first thing on Google. Now they use ChatGPT or they use AI. They also
Yeah,
see Wikipedia. So like some of the articles we did, like eventually we end up seeing like 20 million views. And that article didn't exist before we came in, and suddenly people search it and then they find it. And that's I think the beauty of really how interconnected the world is these days.
that's wonderful. That's amazing. I have to ask you, so you talked about misinformation in the region in the Middle East, but as someone who's come here to the United States, which we're supposed to have all these First Amendment rights, and do you, and with the changes that are going on politically here, do you worry about misinformation in our society today here in the United States? Do you see
Of course.
changes or
And also we have seen, I think was it Wired magazine when they did this article that there's somebody who created two Facebook events, one saying Trump is my president, one saying Trump is not my president, and then he put them both in Central Park, and then he got them to kind of fight each other to that's crazy of a story of like how so that's it. I mean you have kind of state-sponsored misinformation, which is sometimes called disinformation. The U.S. is definitely a target of so many of it.
hmm
The other one is kind of self-inflicted misinformation, and people who just want to make a good buck and want to like create polarizing and extreme content, and then they're able to. So there's that. So yes, I mean the way I can see it very clearly is really the Middle East. I mean, the
mm,
commentary about the Middle East is extremely insane, and I think that's part of it is that the a lot of the information they are getting is a lot of it is misinformation about the region. And
yeah.
um, I remember somebody asked me if we have cars in Iraq, and I was like, what?
I can assure you that there are cars in Iraq, yeah, especially in Baghdad. There's a lot of traffic problems in Baghdad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about the ecosystem information where some people are so misinformed about a country that the United States has spent $1 trillion on, and they still don't know if Iraq has cars or not. So
Yeah.
that tells you a lot about how people are consuming information. Leave aside all of the things I said about the architects of the Iraq War popularizing that everybody wants Thomas Jefferson in Fallujah. then that's also another version of misinformation. And yes, it's pretty worrisome. And now with digital technology and AI and I think we there is a serious conversation need to be had on media literacy and how people navigate information in this age. And I don't think we're having enough. It needs to be, I think, installed in the education system anywhere possible.
Yeah.
As um,
I was going to say I agree, and we've been having. There's some other uh, um, Substack conversations I've been in on that talk. We've been talking about the kind of the post literacy, the problem of deep literacy, and the fact that people are, at least in the West or in the United States, the data seems to suggest that people aren't really reading as much as they used to and taking on information. Everything is just internet based and very short kind of bursts of information, not always accurate. So we're in a different era now. So it seems like we all have to kind of fight this fight to preserve like real deep literacy in our societies because it's so important.
it is, and I mean, living under like kind of both authoritarian and extremist situations. I mean, unfortunately, extremism is very emotionally appealing.
Hmm.
It has this, and I've seen people being recruited to join extremist groups in Iraq, and it's ex very easily understood. It's black and white. There's good guys and bad guys, and we are the good guys and they are the bad guys. And
Yeah.
uh, so I think it's like in a way we like those of us who are interested in the truth or understanding the truth, like need to take that into account in terms of like we are at a disadvantage always because those who spread misinformation or those who spread extremist ideas always have an advantage because sometimes the truth is not sexy. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's really just not that interesting. Like
Or it's very
and
complicated. I mean, that's how yeah, sometimes it isn't that black and white when you really dig deeply into an issue and realize that there's no easy um, answer here, I guess.
yeah, and and that's sometimes not emotionally satisfying, right? It's
Yeah.
like sometimes what people want to be satisfied is like, oh, they want like something very interesting, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just things just happen, and sometimes they're random, and there's not necessarily rational order in which everybody's motivated by some sort of an incentive. That's the thing with the human beings, and yeah, I think we there is a lot of work, and I'm very worried about the United States, particularly because of its influence. Right? I mean, the United States is
Yeah.
engaged significantly around the world. I'm from one of those countries. I was one of those countries where the U.S. had done significant amount of work. We have the largest U.S. embassy in the world, and the largest U.S. consulate in the world in Erbil. And so it doesn't matter significantly what people know about the Middle East and understand about the Middle East. And that's why we started Middle East Uncovered, which is the publication you mentioned, is after seeing a lot of that, not just the misinformation, but how information is really kind of tailored for very different audiences. And I've seen that in Washington, D.C. when I go to think tanks and attend think tank events and then see like the list of sponsors and some of the donors to these think tanks. And the New York Times did a good job in like kind of identifying who funds who and etc. But really like DC is full of landmines, not physical, thank goodness,
Yeah.
but it's okay. This person is a lobbyist for country X from the Middle East, and this person lobbies for this company that is invested in the Middle East on this industry, and then it's like, and then these people try to like filter the information they want you to know
Yeah.
and push that to policymakers and the general American public. That makes it extremely difficult for first the general public who are not necessarily vested in the day-to-day of things, but most dangerously to policymakers who some of them don't do enough homework and then they send their intern to do the knowledge kind of gathering, and then they get some cases state-sponsored lobbying and information, and then they try to feed that to Congress people, and then Congress people vote on things they don't know much about, and the cycle kind of continues of really like bad information leading to bad actions. And I think that's where, in a way, like in the US, it's far more consequential what people consume information than, let's say, in a small village in Iraq, where people don't necessarily have a lot of power to influence world affairs.
Yeah, I've always thought that, I mean, one of the things, one of the takeaways from my career was that having spent some time in the Middle East, and I'm not claiming to be someone who really understand. I mean, it's a very of course, Middle East is a complicated region, but it seems, and of course, most Americans haven't set foot in the Middle East, and they have, I would say Americans have a slightly stereotypical views of the Middle East. They don't understand. I mean, when Americans, a lot of Americans, I don't want to stereotype Americans either, but they tend to think of terrorism and all the negative things they see on the news, and they don't quite understand the culture and all the other aspects of life that go on and it's a very diverse and very large region. So like I just feel as if Americans kind of have many Americans have a stereotypical view of the Middle East. I don't know if
They
you'd
do,
agree with that.
yeah. That's why I've been a very big fan of Dubai. Not that I'm not
Which I've
advocating
never been
for,
to. I've never been to
uh,
Dubai. So
and I'm not advocating in any sense on behalf of that government. But the thing about
yeah,
Dubai is like it is somewhere in between that makes people in the West feel comfortable enough. Everything
it,
works. Your
it's
American
more
Express,
modern. Yeah.
yeah, your American Express works. There's Uber. There's all of American modern technology. There's McDonald's and Popeyes for those interested.
But see,
And
well, it's funny you should say that because I took my wife to we're just kind of funny this way, but we went. I took her to Cairo a couple years ago, and she loved the fact that it was all everything was old, the buildings were old, and it just had that old world feel to it. She liked that aspect of it, but I think I would agree. Most Americans like the more modern comforts of Dubai or places like
I
that.
mean, I think in graduation, so I took a group of my friends, really my really close friends here in New York, to Iraq and to Erbil and about a couple of years ago. And I was like,
Hmm.
guys, you have to see my home country. I cannot take you to Baghdad right now, but at
Yeah.
least set foot in Iraq. At least set foot in a place that's called Iraq. And then I was trying to think of like how to persuade them and how to kind of gradually make them move to from kind of East Village, Manhattan to northern Iraq, and I was like, hey, like let's take off a plan, and the part of the plan is you go to Dubai first. You go to Fly Emirates. It's a very good airline. You're
Oh
gonna see
yeah.
something a bit luxurious. You're gonna land there. Okay, that looks a bit similar, maybe a bit
Hmm.
cleaner than New York. And then transition, spend a couple of days there, and then you can go to Iraq and see 5,000-year-old castle.
Yeah.
And everybody enjoyed that kind of like to see all of these aspects of the region, which I think if which why is like its safety and kind of stability is so uh like not I mean ethically but also like it's a beautiful place, like it's a beautiful region, and
Hmm.
you can have all of these things. Like one of my favorite things about northern Iraq, like in Erbil, where you have now some of these rooftop restaurants which are new, and they just
Hmm.
came in from some of the Kurds who used to live in Germany, and they studied architecture, and then they're trying to build some of the new buildings in Erbil. And then from that, you can see an Assyrian castle of Erbil that was built 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. And you can
Yeah.
have this really the mix of like a rooftop building built by Kurdish German architects mixed up with a
It's
6,000 year
great.
old castle,
Yeah.
and there is a German beer garden that is not far away from it. And then also there is a couple hundred years old kebab restaurant from
Hmm.
family owned over generations. Like this kind of combo is phenomenal. Like I think that make like if there is safety and like prosperity in that, like it definitely could be a place where a lot of people could spend a vacation on.
I used
Like
to think the same thing. I know Baghdad's a very dense, yeah, I don't know. I've only seen parts of Baghdad, but I used to think the same thing in Baghdad. I used to think, if this place was secure, truly secure. I think there would be many, many Western tourists who would come here just to experience the experience of traveling to, because you go in the evening, it's warm and there's the palm trees and Camp Victory had all the canal. I used to look at the Camp Victory area and I'd say, you could make a resort out of this, and I think Western tourists would actually come here to experience and just to see this country because, but the problem is that there's no security. I mean, this is Baghdad. I know it's different up north, but anyway.
Definitely. I mean, Baghdad also has the Beit al-Hikmah, right? Like
Hmm.
the translation of it, it used to be the capital of the Abbasid Empire for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, I'm
The
biased, of
South's
course.
beautiful. I mean, the area Hilla where you're from, the South, you can see traditional, I mean, the life you can see traditional Arab, Iraqi culture and lifestyles there, that the rural living that hasn't changed at all in hundreds of years. I mean, it seemed that way when I was there in the military. It seemed very traditional.
Yeah, that's more, yeah, yeah, the South, like called the Ahwar, the marshes, which are also like, I mean, that's where on kind of Western tourists, the Pope went there. And he went to Ur, which is in southern Iraq, in I think Nasiriyah, I think Nasiriyah province, and that was the first writing of human history.
Hmm.
So Ur
I didn't
had
know
the
that.
first,
Wow.
yeah, the first cuneiform writing in human history was there because that is what's, I mean, what the term Mesopotamia comes from, right? The land of the two
Hmm.
rivers. And
Hmm.
these are the two rivers. So this is the Tigris and the Euphrates, and that's where the first human civilizations existed in that part. So like anyone, I mean, it's not like glamorous probably as Beirut, which I think was one of the most beautiful cities in the world because on the Mediterranean. And but I think if you look at it as a combo, like okay, Beirut is only an hour and a half from Baghdad or 2 hours. Okay, you
Yeah.
spend some time in Beirut and then you go see some history in Baghdad and then you fly to Dubai and see some modernity. Like if this is like all kind of safe and connected and modern, like in terms of logistics and everything, it's phenomenal. I mean, just that's the reason why some people like Europe, right? Like, oh, I go to Norway, it's this. I go to Italy, is this. Well, the Middle East also has the same kind of characteristics. Like in Erbil, you have beautiful mountains and valleys, and it
Hmm.
snows during the winter, so it has a bit of a colder climate. And you go to the south, and it's marshes, and you go to the west, and it's desert. So you have all of these different climates, and you can visit in different seasons. I mean, that's really my in my Twitter bio. I say is like my dream about the Middle East is that more people visit the Middle East than escape the Middle East.
Yeah. I
And
concur with that. I hope we get there. I really truly hope we get there because I wish more people could not. I mean, I went over there because it was a war zone to work, but I would love to go there, and I have in other countries. But yeah, someday I would love to go back. I know you. I guess the North, Kurdistan's pretty safe, but I would love to get back to other parts of Iraq and travel around. That would be wonderful. Maybe
yeah,
someday.
when
Inshallah.
inshallah, and if it goes safe, maybe I will start my own tourism company, and then
Yeah, that'd be
and
great.
then
I'll look for that.
and then
Yeah, you'll
I'll
have
send you
two
the link.
you'll be doing very well. You'll have two companies then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's a beautiful place. I mean, it's and I think it's really worth like fighting for and also fighting for a better relationship between it and the United States. Like that's now that me being dual citizen, I think I'm to some extent I'm an ambassador of both. Like I want more people in Iraq to have positive views about America, and I want more people in America to have positive views about Iraq, and hopefully eventually we will like have more trade and more kind of coexistence than pretty much lots of our modern history, which is, as you said, based on a lot of wars and kind of conflicts. And I think that's definitely not how things should be.
Yeah, I hope you succeed. I hope we succeed together. I mean, and I think it is possible. I think, I don't, I think it's not correct to get caught into this deterministic thinking that, well, the Middle East is always going to be a war zone and that's not necessarily true. It's up to the decisions that people make, governments, individuals. And I do think the situation could improve if we start making some better decisions. But I wanted to ask you, so maybe we could segue here to the current conflict, unfortunately. What, so what are your thoughts? I mean, so first of all, I want to ask you about the current war, just your view. I mean, first of all, what are your thoughts on whether or not this war was necessary? And then, like, secondly, I wanted to ask you, I mean, it just seems like we're into kind of a stalemate now, and this thing could drag on for a very long time. But what are your thoughts on where this war is going?
So a lot to honestly, like on a personal level, I think my sleep has been affected for the past 30 days.
I'm
So,
sorry.
um, so
I think a
yeah,
lot of people have because it's really, I mean, the thing we talk a lot today about the Iraq war, but the Iraq, and I wrote a little bit about this on my Substack, I think, just trying to compare the two. Iraq, there was a little bit of fallout regionally from the Iraq war. There was, but it didn't affect the world the way this current conflict with a closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This is really, I think, a much more serious situation potentially if this goes on.
yeah. So it is. I mean, it's very serious. I'm gonna wear the two hats here.
Hmm.
One from kind of a regional. Let's say start with the regional, and then whether the imminent threat to the U.S. and that's kind of I think debatable to some extent. But
Hmm.
from a regional perspective, since the and I'm talking about the region predominantly from the Gulf, meaning the GCC countries and the
Hmm.
Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and Yemen and all of that kind of region. Since 1979 and the Islamic Revolution or the Iranian Revolution, that has really changed the landscape of the entire region. It's one of
Mm.
those events that
Yeah.
has really shaken the region, and I definitely believe that taken it to a very negative direction.
Hmm.
When Islamic Revolution came in, and that's I guess go to the details of what Iran is that Iran is a country from kind of a nation state point of view, but it's also a revolution. And Henry Kissinger, which is not necessarily I'm a big fan of, he said Iran has to decide whether it's a country or a cause.
Mm.
And for many of us in the region, Iran is a cause. It's
Yeah.
not just the country. It's you've been to Iraq, you've seen how many times Qasem Soleimani used to go around, fund militias,
Yeah.
fuel sectarian tensions, but
Hmm.
attack Sunni areas so they can revolt. So then the Sunnis get radicalized. Then we can kill more Sunnis, and then then more people will need Iran, and then etc. So in Iraq, we've seen it like really on day-to-day basis of how this revolution, quote unquote Islamic revolution, really has kind of poisoned the well for all of us. And
Hmm.
the part of the reason why even I mean I mentioned Dubai and like how kind of developed it is. Part of the reason why a lot of people don't invest in many of these areas is because they know there's this bully next door called Iran
Hmm.
that is now firing rockets on oil areas in Saudi Arabia, oil gas fields in Qatar, etc. So from a regional perspective, and I've always been a fan, I've always been an advocate that no one can fight for the region more than the region itself. Like we
Mm.
can ask from help from overseas. Yes, F-35s are great. The U.S. Air Force is great, but there's always going to be nuances. There's always going to be interest. There's always going to be different from region's interest. Like the United States has its own interests. Israel, of course, has a very different interest. But the thing is that like we have like we should do better on that front before the US kind of where the US comes in. So and there has been some efforts and they have died down. Many of the Arab states eventually kind of like I would say adjusted, but they kind of accepted the new reality. China came into the fold, told them like, okay, we're gonna promise that the Iranians not gonna fire any rockets. Obviously, that didn't work out as we see right now, but there was this Beijing agreement in which the Saudis eventually made a deal with the Iranians to stop kind of attacks, etc. So many of the kind of the Arabs got too comfortable. They were like, hey, there's
Mm.
now China that's trying to protect us from Iran, and now things calm down. Well, that didn't work out now. Um, and then so that's from the region. I think we should figure out a way of ending the Iranian regime from a regional perspective. Then comes in the American perspective, American hats, and also the Donald Trump hats, which are a bit kind of different and unconventional foreign policy that we're dealing with. And here's what I think the good aspect and then possibly the negative aspect. I have an opinion that the only one who could actually execute a war against Iran is Donald Trump
Mm,
for a lot of different reasons. Number one, part of the war is purely media, right? It's just
mm,
propaganda war, and
yeah.
he kind of mastered that, uh, and he is not gonna, and because this is in his second term and he doesn't care much about public opinion, that much makes it that he is the only one who can actually push further than any other president in conventional sense. Like even if it's a
Hmm.
Republican, let's say Marco Rubio or Nikki Haley would have been the Republican candidates, then after the Strait of Hormuz thing or any kind of complication, they would be like, well, we have a next election we have to win, we have other things we have to do, and then they're going to stop the operation. Donald
Hmm.
Trump is the only one who can actually continue the operation because he's not, and that makes him to some extent the one with the extreme force that can actually change the Iranian dynamics because Iran is an extremely complicated country. It's an
Yeah.
like it's Iraq and other places are again peanuts by comparison. We had
Don't say that because I thought Iraq was an extremely complicated country, but it's Iran's even worse or more
it, it's
complicated.
it's more complicated because Iraq had a state in a conventional sense. It has Saddam
Mm,
Hussein that and yes, these and he had what's called Fidayul Saddam, which is a paramilitary group that were kind of follow Saddam, but it's nothing compared to the IRGC, in which it's an international military force that is aimed to train people in civil wars all across the world, from Lebanon to Yemen. So it's a very kind of complicated, multi-layered
well,
system with a lot of
the IRGC is kind of they have so many corrupt business. They're like a business entity as well. They're like a state within a state, right?
exactly. So they're
Yeah,
everything, right?
they're
So
every
so so
very
yeah,
powerful.
yeah. So they can own shopping malls all the way to they can deal with the drugs and they can deal with gun trading. They do like they kind of like do everything, and they have offices in Venezuela. They have like so they're one of those things that are like extremely like difficult to and as a neighbor, like I grew up with them as a neighbor, we had a lot of difficulty understanding them, but we start seeing that they start building the same thing in Iraq because now Iraq to some extent is the Iran colony, and they also built up what's called al-Hashd al-Sha'bi, the PMF, which is
Hmm.
separate than the Iraqi military. That
Right.
so they have this kind of what they could create like parallel militaries, and in a way like it's an extremely difficult country to deal with a very complicated identity of what Iranian actually means, and that's itself is meets a 5 episodes. But there's that. My kind of concern and negative uh, is that I am quite worried that Trump gets super excited about Venezuela and he thought that this will end up being the same thing, or
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
he's getting like, oh, this is just a group. Oh, like we removed Maduro, we found a corrupt politician we can play with, like
Yeah.
Delcy Rodriguez, and
It's going to be quick
Iran
and easy.
is going to be quick and easy,
Hmm.
um, and so that's my very worry, and also like this this could go on for a long time if number one, we actually know what the goals of the war are, which we still don't know. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's an operation, not a war. So they don't. At least in Iraq, there was a clear, I guess, goal, which was removing Saddam. But they
Remove
also
Saddam Hussein. Well, actually, the goal, I mean, not to get too far off on a tangent, but it did after in Iraq, written a little bit about this. The goals did shift in Iraq as well. Also, they got rid of Saddam, but then
100%
when they didn't find any weapons of mass destruction, then they started talking about uh,
counterterrorism and counterinsurgency
well,
and all of
not
that.
just terror, but fostering democracy in the Middle East. They were going to make Iraq a democratic country, and that was going to spread throughout the Middle East. That became part of the mission as well. So that, I don't know, it changed over time a little bit in Iraq too.
Yeah, so, and that's I think, and look how that turned out. so 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 I'm worried that we're going into that same like which is like we don't know what we because if like that's the thing, and also having an external part, having Israel as a partner who also have very different goals. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
my understanding now is that Israel wants regime change, and at least what I'm hearing from Marco Rubio, they want regime weakening. So they want just a weaker Iran with no nuclear weapons and basically these are actually completely different goals. Like
Mm,
one is about dismantling the Iranian state and replacing it with something. Could be
yeah.
better, could be worse. That is very different than just weakening a regime and making it like delay its capabilities or delay its capacity to build new ballistic missiles. And I think that also yeah changes the entire operation. So I think how realistic it is that any of these could be. I mean, the weakening is of course easier. Um, does it solve the problem? No. Like it's
Mm,
only a matter of time. It is possible that, I mean, if again looks at a silver lining, that if let's say it takes Iran 15 years to redevelop its capacity, my hope is that Arab states and especially the GCC would arm themselves enough in the next 15 years that Iran would be contained after seeing all of their neighbors being stronger than them. So in that way, they're going to wake up to a different neighborhood in 15 years that they are right now. That's
yeah. And
going to go on a positive side.
I think that's going to happen too, because the GCC states are they're terrified that Iran's going to come back, at least in the near term, stronger. If they don't, if the regime is not taken out, then they're going to have to, and potentially there's the nuclear issue as well, that they're going to have to deal with all the the after effects of this war, I guess.
100%. And we've seen what Iran is capable of without a nuclear weapon, right? They're firing rockets
They've
at
some,
Fairmont Hotel and Qatar LNG, and they even threatened the water sanitation, and most of
yeah,
the water in that area is built on sanitation and converting Gulf water to drinkable water. So like they have showed their kind of true colors during this war, in my opinion. And I think so that would not be a negative outcome. The regime change piece again is like, are we falling to another uh Iranians all are liberal Democrats and they're just waiting for the regime to
yeah,
like one of the commentators, I think it was it on Piers Morgan, was saying that like, oh, 90% of Iranians are like secular liberals. And I'm like,
that's crazy.
even Sweden is not 90% secular liberals. Like, so you're telling me that Iran, which has produced the IRGC and Ayatollah Khomeini,
Yeah,
is more secular than Sweden? Like, what are you talking about? Like, so I think there is, and with the internet being shut down for 2 months now in Iran, like, how do you know what's true? I mean, I don't know. I know a lot of Iranians. You talk to five Iranians, they give you 20 different opinions, is the norm. And you
hmm,
talk to different, like you talk to the Persians, and they tell you, well, everybody wants to be part of Persia, and the Kurds are happy, and then the Arabs are happy. And then you talk to the Kurds, and they're like, no, we don't want to be part of Persia. So I don't know what this guy's, I don't know what this guy's talking about.
yeah,
And then there's Arabs in Iran who are called something called the Ahwaz region, and I listen to their podcasts. Some of them live in the diaspora, some of them actually live in the US. And they're like, we don't want to be part of, even if Iran was secular, they used to kill us and like force us to speak their language, and they discriminated against our schools. So I'm like, okay, this doesn't look like a very straightforward
yeah,
situation where it's like suddenly the Ayatollah falls and there is like again, Voltaire, an Iranian version of Voltaire, is going to rise up in Tehran, and I think that's and with the Reza Pahlavi and out of the Shah, and how likely that, I mean, didn't the Iranians themselves overthrow the Shah? So how would they welcome back his son? I mean, also possible, but like still, there is a lot of unknowns. And I think there needs to be a lot of questions being asked to the administration and also to the Israelis is like, have you thought this through? Like,
yeah. I think that was again. I wrote a little bit about this as well. Now I was drawing from my experience in Iraq, and I felt the same way. I said the same words. Like I don't think this is very has been if the regime falls, and that's an if. And no one. We can all agree that this regime, is not. It needs to go. No one. would argue that this is a benign regime or a good regime. But if it were to go, there you could see so many scenarios where just chaos would follow in the wake of a collapse of the regime, and that would lead to all kinds of other problems. So that was the problem, I think that, but you can't really plan for that. And the other thing was, even in Iraq, we had forces on the ground to try and do something to shape the situation, and look how that turned out. That was very messy as well. So it's
Yeah,
very
I mean,
difficult.
I give you like a personal experience. I mean, just to show how complicated things on the ground. I remember very well in my neighborhood when the US military used to come in and knock on doors and try to see if everybody has guns or rockets in their house. Probably remember those days as well. And I remember that people in my neighborhood were reporting on other neighbors because somebody refused to sell them the house. Okay.
Yeah,
So they
yeah,
they call the US.
retribution, making things up against their, yeah,
So,
yeah,
so what locals were doing were using an external force, meaning the U.S. military, third party,
yeah.
who probably doesn't know who was selling house to who, that didn't have the
No,
real
they had no
estate,
idea.
the real estate information of West Baghdad, and they were using them to be like, oh, heck, I have an issue with this tribes member. I want him dead. So I'm going to report him as a member of this terrorist group that
It,
I know the US would want to kill or
yeah.
kidnap. And then this person ends up in Abu Ghraib for a couple of months. And then
Uh,
he got radicalized by another group that has been in prison in Abu Ghraib for years. And then this person who might start as a non extremist or non terrorist or non member of terrorist groups end up in a camp and in a prison and then end up being more radicalized after prison than he did before prison.
yeah.
So there are all of these details that are again, I think can be studied, it can be understood, but you really need to do the homework. Like the
Mm,
idea is that you can just operate on like wishful thinking of, oh, there's gonna be like there's no inshallah in wars, in my opinion. Like, like there are so many things that are purely predictable, right? If you have and I think my hope is that the Iraq war is taught always and understood as much as humanly possible. Like there are so many things that could have been, like, I guess, prevented or like knowing that, for example, the Middle East doesn't have as a strong identity of nation state as some other countries, right? Like uh, my tribe has a lot of roots in Saudi Arabia and Syria. Then I have roots in, for example, Mosul, right? Or because things are a bit fluid and understanding even some of these basics helps us understand like how we want to navigate things that are not just military. Yeah, military is easy. Okay, you blow up things and then you kill people X and Y and Z. Um, but there is something eventually you're going to stop killing. Eventually you have to
yeah.
think about like what is post killing? What are we going to do after we kill senior leadership? And so I think there is a lot of more. I think questions need to be asked. Um, there are some people, I guess, I think probably are smart in handling this. Like Marco Rubio has a lot of knowledge in kind of closed societies, having kind of a background. His family is from Cuba, so probably he understands some of those nuances of authoritarian regimes. But I think that's, but he's
He's,
also
I
one
think,
guy.
I think he's a little bit in the minority. It seems like the president's only interested in blowing things up and, you know, sinking navies and things of that nature. But we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, like Call of Duty episodes. Like I just, um, yeah, I mean, we shall see. I mean, now as we're recording this, I think the war restarted. Possibly there were attacks. I saw in the news that Tehran is having sirens and everything. So,
Oh,
um, so yeah, so maybe the war continues. But and I think this is probably the most maybe not televised, but like the most theatrical war I think I've ever experienced. Like between like Iran producing so many AI videos
oh
of
yeah. Oh yeah.
like you look at their Twitter like and so the social media and it's like completely made up of like IRGC swimming with sharks and whales and we don't have whales in the Gulf. Like what are like there is no dolphins in the Gulf. Like so this is like obviously made up. Only thing they need is like dinosaurs to show that there's dinosaurs in the AI video. So there's that, and then there's like the tweets or the post of like Trump wants to blow up the entire Iranian civilization. And
Yeah.
like seeing that is like what the hell is going on here? Like this is completely like
It's the media world we live in. I mean, it's so important nowadays, and that's the way I guess it's just the propaganda of our era, I guess. But again, I mean that you have the administration, they're putting out all these kinds of almost cartoonish clips of the war, that to me seems to glorify violence. And, I'm not a big fan of that, but that's the world we live in today, I guess, where everything is based on the internet.
yeah, and I guess some people yeah fall for it, and yeah, it's a very interesting times we live in for sure.
Exactly. Well, listen, Faisal, I don't want to take up too much of your time. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. I
Thank you,
really, I really appreciate your expertise. And like I said, I wanted to get someone on from the region that can talk, and you have, it's been great, talk about the culture and the history and just to provide a little bit more nuance to what's going on. So thank you so much. I hope
thank
to
you,
talk to you again. And just again, I want to plug your organization. So Faisal Saeed Al Mutar, he's the founder of Ideas Beyond Borders. He also writes for the Middle East Uncovered. So definitely check out the Substack. You also have your own personal Substack, right? You have
yeah.
more.
So it's called The Day After. So
Okay.
it's something that I'm brewing a lot in like post regime change situations. So one of my
Oh,
projects
great.
I'm doing actually research on right now on in a fellowship I'm doing with the university, but I want to eventually like make it a bit more dissectable and much like, okay, what happens after we get rid of the bad guys? Like,
Yeah.
and again, I'm bringing some personal experiences, but I'm also reading a lot on like Latin America. I'm reading a lot on other parts of the world. And now the regime change in Syria. That's the things I'm actually monitoring quite a bit because that's the most recent regime
Yeah,
change.
Syria
Uh,
has been totally overshadowed by what's going on. I mean, it's a very interesting situation in Syria right now. So yeah,
yeah,
I'm glad you're paying attention to that.
so that's what I'm yeah. So the day after, but Middle East Uncovered is where you will see actually most of my writings and also writings from the region who provide local perspectives that I think your others might want to hear.
Okay, wonderful. So please check out his sites, his Substack sites, and again, I really appreciate your time and hope to talk to you again. And oh,
Definitely.
shukran jazilan and for Saida, Said.
العفو العفو. شرفنا
Okay,
شرفنا.
okay, take care.
You too. مع
Okay.
السلامة.